The difference between an invention and an innovation is that invention is something new. Innovation is making something real and economic out of this invention.
Shai Albaranes, thank you for coming to 20 Minute Leaders. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm fine. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm extremely excited to have you talking about corporate innovation. You're a part of a group called Orbia, 22,000 people, yet you're tasked with possibly one of the most difficult jobs there. How do you take an organization of tens of thousands of people and bring innovation, whether it's bottom up, top down? I've had the privilege of being both at large organizations like 8200, which is a large organization, but also part of a startup like HIPAA, which is 200 people. But Shai, before that, you have to tell me how you started by creating a board game. What's that about?
Okay. So it was after my army service, and during the army service, you feel empowered, you feel important, and you feel great. And then you finish the army service. I was in a combat unit, and basically no one recognizes you for whatever you did. So when you look for jobs, you start getting all kind of like lousy jobs. So I started one of these lousy jobs, and I was pretty bored. Um, and it happened that it was the 50th anniversary of Israel. And a friend of mine and I, we said, this must be a very, very good business opportunity. So we started thinking, okay, how can we make a business out of this like big event in the history of Israel? 50 years of Israel. And to make a long story short, we screened a few ideas, but we came up with this idea that people don't know, or kids do not know, the history of Israel. So
Right.
if we can teach them in a very fun way the basics about the history of Israel, the leaders, the peace agreement, the wars, the sporting events, that would be great. So this is what we did, and it
I
was a
have
big
to say
success
that
for
I
it.
love that. I love that because, like a lot of other kids, I grew up not really learning the history of Israel. When I was about to go to Officers Academy to Badechad, I got a book that was this thick that I had to now within about 24 hours memorize the whole thing. And I wish I had a game like that when I was just starting out. But walk me through your journey from there because you've done quite a few fascinating things leading up to corporate innovation. A lot of them are really tangled. You have McKinsey in there, you have Netafim in there. Talk to me a little bit about your process up to today.
Yeah. So I think the funny thing is that now, looking 20 years back, there is kind of like a
Right.
red a line, a thread that connecting all these things. But when I was doing each one of these, it didn't seem like there is a story. So
Right.
as I said, my first real business experience was this startup company that developed the board game for the kids. And then I said, okay, I need to get a technology education. So I went to do a computer science degree in the IDC. And I was very, very fortunate to be accepted to the Zell program
Oh
in the
wow.
IDC.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this was the first year of the Zell program, right?
The very first year. Wait,
Yeah.
so you were in it with Asaf,
Yes, this is
right?
how I know Asaf very well.
This is how you know
We
Asaf, my boss. Amazing. Okay.
exactly. And we were actually in a very small study group where we did a consulting project to a big company in Israel, and we became good friends. And yeah, this is how I know Asaf.
Now things are coming together. He also went to McKinsey. Okay, great. Wonderful.
Yeah,
So what happens
yeah.
after
So I
Zell?
so I did Zell, and what I understood is that I love technology, but I like the business side of technology. I couldn't program, like it was. I got bored, right? So then I worked for a few startup companies, mainly in business development and marketing. So you could say that the first 8-9 years were kind of like an entrepreneurial type of experience, either my own startup or other people's startups.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2007, I said, okay, I want to jump to the adult pool, the big boys pool. And by the way, that's another. Maybe Asaf even doesn't know about it, but when we were in Zell, he was starting to talk about doing an MBA in Stanford and in Chicago, and I said, really? It never even crossed my mind. But then I said, okay, if he talks about it, it makes sense. Let me dig into that. So I dug into that a few years later, and I understood that I want to do it and I can do it. So I went to do my MBA at INSEAD,
Yes.
which was a great experience. And then I said, okay, this was nice, but the real business school of the world is consulting. So I joined McKinsey, and I did that for a few years in London and in Israel.
Wow.
And then in 2012, there was a very interesting opportunity to join Netafim. Netafim is an Israeli-born company, and today is the largest irrigation company in the world. Probably some people know about it.
In the
And I did
world,
that
I
for,
had no idea. I knew it was a
yeah,
miracle. It's one of Israel's early miracles, but I wasn't aware that it's the biggest irrigation company in the world.
it is. It's now more than $1 billion in revenue, and it's the
Wow.
largest irrigation company in the world. Yeah.
Wow. And do you mind sharing just in two words the backstory of Netafim, why it was innovation through necessity? Because I get so inspired every time I understand that why it even happened.
It happened again, like you said, out of necessity. So people were looking to, grow stuff in the desert.
In the desert. Because we
Yeah.
had to.
Yeah, because a big chunk of Israel land is a desert, and people were sent to inhabit the desert. So the
Right.
Netafim was founded by one of the kibbutz in Israel, kibbutz Hatzerim, okay, because they needed a way to cultivate the desert, and they needed a job for the elderly that couldn't go work outside, but they needed to do something indoor, right?
Right.
So they partner with an engineer who came up with the original drip concept, and they launched Netafim, and 60 something years later, it is the largest irrigation company in the world.
It's remarkable to me to think that we have an Israeli company that is 60 something years old. But you're in it to fame. You're working there really with the leadership. How do you get enticed by this idea of innovation? Because already Netafim is a big organization, but then you also transition to Orbia, and there you're tasked with leading innovation. So how does that come about?
Okay, so just to close the story, Netafim, I did various positions. The last one, I was managing the company product portfolio. So we were constantly thinking, what is it that we can innovate, right?
Right.
Um, and
A
then
billion
and then
dollar portfolio,
Orbia,
right?
yes, yes. And then for me, it was a big a combination of a couple of things in early 2018, when Orbia acquired Netafim. Okay,
Hmm.
and Orbia is a very large public company, a multinational, $7 billion in revenues. So they acquired Orbia Netafim in 2018. And the other thing that happened in the same very months, a new CEO came to Orbia, a guy called Daniel Martinez, and he started a very, very ambitious transformation program. And he knew that innovation is a significant pillar of that transformation. So he was looking for someone to lead the innovation activities inside Orbia. So he pulled me out of Netafim and put me as part of the Orbia management team, and told me, corporate innovation, go build it. Um,
So
you
before
know,
we continue to talking about exactly what you did there, when I hear the word innovation, and a lot of people today they hear innovation, it's a little bit of a fluffy word. Yes, we innovate this. It's like when a startup says we revolutionize this, right? What is innovation in its core that this new CEO said, I need a figure that can come and help us do it properly within Orbia?
Right. So there are multiple dimensions to that answers. To that answer, I'll walk you like briefly. Let me know if you want me to dig into any one of these. Okay. So the
Wonderful.
first thing was to define what is innovation, right? For us, because innovation in a startup is completely different than innovation in a large multinational, right?
Right.
So, and I spent maybe the first 6 months doing a lot of research on what does it mean innovation in the corporate world. And I met startups and VCs and incubators and accelerators and academia, and I read thousands of books and articles, and in order to be able to clarify what is it we want to do, right? So the first thing was a relatively simple definition that everybody will understand. It doesn't mean that it's perfect, but something that everybody can connect to. So internally, we define innovation as creating something new that addresses a need, and this is the important part, the economic value that it will generate is higher than the cost of developing it, right?
Why is that important? Why is that an important piece of the puzzle?
It's an important piece because you might know that 95 or so percent of the global IP or patents that are being created are never commercialized, right? So,
95%.
yeah. So the difference between an invention and an innovation is that invention is something new. Innovation is making something real and economic out of this invention, right?
I've never thought of it that way.
So it's the innovation is different than creativity. It's different than invention because, as we said, 95% of the invention are never commercialized. Not because they're not novel, but because there's no economic value, right?
Right.
So this is how we define it. And then the second step was to understand that innovation is actually not a single term, and there are different types of innovation, right? And your audience can read about it, but I'll give you just the one sentence. There
Please.
are multiple frameworks to think about the types of innovation, but the classic one that people usually use is the difference between core, adjacent, and transformative innovation. Okay, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on that, but just to understand that there are different levels of complexity in innovation. There are some things that are closer to your current capabilities, the core, and there are innovation that relates to new capabilities, new customers, new markets that you want to develop, and this is more transformative, and anything in between.
Mm-hmm.
And and it is critical as an organization, not as a startup. A startup can focus on one specific innovation, right? But as a corporate, you need to invest in all of these three dimensions, right?
Right.
So it's an important understanding. So this was a realization number 2. Okay, realization number 3 was about the fact that innovation, again, in the context of a corporate world, is not an activity, it's a portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about, you're an angel investor, right? If you invest in one company, you have 90% chances to fail. But if you
Probably
invest in
more.
30, you have a certain probability that you can, out of the entire portfolio, you'll make a profit, right?
Right.
And this is exactly the same way to think about innovation. It's a portfolio of activities. Some of them will fail, some of them will succeed, but you want to think about the entire portfolio and that it progresses towards the goals that you want to achieve, right? So this was realization number 3. And realization number 4 is about the time horizon. You want to invest in activities in that portfolio. Some of them are short term, some of them are medium term, and some of them will pay out 7-10 years out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is if you want to kind of like the thing that I understood in the research, what are like the 4 principles, if you wish. This is what I understood in the research, and in the past 2 years we're trying to implement all of that and building the processes, the infrastructure, the management, and all of that. Which by the way, that's another important thing. Many people think about innovation as kind of like a project, an initiative, but it's important to understand that if you really want to be successful in innovation, you have to think about it as a corporate function.
Right.
like finance, like marketing, like IT, like R&D. You have processes, you have talent development, you have succession plans, you have budget, you have annual targets. This is it's a corporate function like any other function. If you don't manage it this way, it will never succeed.
Right. No, I'm particularly interested in what you were saying before about that innovation. Really, to manage innovation, you're not managing a single project, because you will never invest in a single company and say, I'm putting all my eggs in this basket. You manage a portfolio of innovative solutions that most of them will fail, but you expect that off the whole basket you'll see some profit or some greatness for the company. And I keep thinking to all these occurrences where I'm hearing about my friends who may be going to their managers or their bosses and suggesting some innovative project, and the answer is always no, because this is not likely to succeed. And I can't help but wonder whether their managers are thinking strategically about, okay, what if we just take a pool of these innovative projects, if we can allow ourselves to, and then allow for the real innovation to happen. But Shai, how do you actually tangibly go into an organization that is 22,000 people and encourage innovation? Because you don't, I'm guessing that you're not hiring people to just do innovative things. You're trying to encourage innovation internally within the core of the company, right?
Yeah. So I think what I'll share with you are the 6 current programs that we have under the umbrella of corporate innovation, and this will make it a little bit clearer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. First and foremost, before we talk about the 6 programs, if the CEO and the senior leadership do not think it's a top priority, it will never succeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fortunate to have a very, very visionary, future-thinking, and also a very, very humble and truly great person as my CEO, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without that, I could never embark on the journey, right? And also the entire management of Orbia, which, by the way, all of them other than one are new since the last 2
Wow.
years, right? And really international. But within the corporate innovation, so we have 6 programs. One, we have Orbia Ventures, which is the corporate venture capital fund of Orbia. We have $130 million that we invest in startups that are strategic to any one of our 5 businesses, right?
Wow.
Then we have a startup partnership program where we want to take, products or services developed by startup companies and expand our offering through a commercial partnership.
Mm-hmm.
We have an advanced analytic program, which we started 3 months ago, to deploy advanced technologies like AI and machine learning into the activities that we do. We have a program called Orbia Lighthouse. This is actually the official definition is a venture studio. Again, it's a new term in
Wow.
innovation. People can dig it out, but innovation studio, it's kind of like an internal incubator. Like we launch new digital ventures or new startups, but everything is managed internally. The budget, the exploration, the EIR recruiting, everything is internal.
Right.
The 5th program is what we call Launchpad. It's an internal innovation program
Mm-hmm.
where every person in the organization can participate in innovation. And how do we coach them, and how do we train them, and how we give them budget to pilot? And we already have 8 of those projects in implementation already, right?
So,
And the
so
last
when
piece
you
in the
so this
puzzle,
Launchpad, are these employees that can come and say, I have an idea that I want to explore within Orbia, so I want to take some time to explore this idea, because obviously they have a team that they're working for. So how does it actually work? Because this is where the constraint is, right? They have their daily job, they have their KPIs that they have to meet. Yet they're saying, but I also want to spend some time innovating.
yeah. So the way that it works, we don't carve out people out of their day to day. They need to do it on top of their day to day. Okay, there is a recognition, there is an understanding, and there is clarity from the top management that once a certain idea move into what we call funded experiment, so we give them pilot and we give them money to experiment. Okay, then they can spend 10-20% of their time on that. But
Okay.
all the way through, developing the idea, asking what is the problem, asking what could be the solution, going through the different stages of the screening, it's all on top of their day-to-day job, right? Mm-hmm. But we give them all the coaching. We teach them about lean startup. We bring people that can coach the guys and help them succeed. But it's on top of their day job. It's not a carve-out activity.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of
then
sense.
The last piece in the puzzle is circular economy. It's a huge domain, and we can talk about it for hours. But basically, it's how do we become? Orbia. How can we become more circular? How can we make profit, but also do it in a positive contribution to the planet, right?
I love that. So it sounds like you're a venture capitalist, you're a startup advisor, you're helping drive the company forward, but you're also making the world a better place. So Shai, expect that that a lot of people are going to be very jealous after they listen to this talk. But this was extremely inspiring, and I'm definitely taking a lot of lessons moving forward to whatever ventures I'll start on my own. But before we go, Shai, I have to ask you the most important question, which is 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Yeah. Okay. It's funny because in the process and it kept me awake a little bit last night. The question, because it's a good question, and I also asked my wife, what does she think? So if it's okay with you, I'll tell you what she said, and I'll tell you what I think. Okay.
I
So
love
I
that.
asked her, okay, three words that describe me. So she said ambitious, a leader, and high standards. Well, high standards, it's 2 words, but okay.
There's a hyphen.
And before I asked her, I thought, what would I say about myself? And I said curiosity, perseverance, and growth.
I love that. Curiosity, perseverance, and growth. I think that all 6 words match. Shai, thank you very, very much. This was just wonderful.
My
Thank you for
pleasure.
being on the
Thank you very
show.
much.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.